the promise I made, by the way, was that if by the end of tonight you do not go away enabling yourself to save yourself a minimum of £2,000 in tax, then I'll pay for the tea. So the important thing is to be aware that really what this is about is it's all about solutions. We've heard so many discussions and interpretations of the problems over the last 3 to 5 to 20 years, and not enough about what we can do about it. So the solutions are really what we're focusing on. And what I want to focus on tonight, and I want to make sure that everybody has a clear understanding when they go away from tonight of what they can do right now to start the process of bringing down or changing a tyranny into a democracy. Right, this quote from Mahatma Gandhi appealed to me because of my background. You assist an evil system most effectively by obeying its orders. An evil system never deserves such an allegiance. Allegiance to it means partaking of the evil. A good person will resist an evil system with his or her whole soul. And somebody made up the word tonight, or said, that's us, we're solutionaries. And I thought, that's brilliant, that's exactly what we're about. Solutionaries. So, just a little bit about me. My background is as a behavioural scientist, social engineer, basically trying to create the environment within which people's behaviour changes automatically without them necessarily knowing anything about it. Now that sounds very manipulative. The important bit is to make people aware of that process and to make sure the process moves us towards benefit for everybody, mutual benefit, and not harm to anybody. So that's really what I've spent my life as. Since 2003, I have been a self-taught war law lawyer. People say, are you a solicitor or barrister or anything like that? And I say, no, I'm a war law lawyer. Lawyer is defined in the English dictionary as someone who is versed in the law. And I have versed myself in the laws of war and peace. What I was horrified to discover in 2002 was that there was almost nobody in this country who could call themselves a war law lawyer. Now, the laws of war, agreed between nations, are probably the most important laws that we have. And yet nobody in this country who isn't employed by the British government is a war law lawyer. And that's appalling, because you can't earn any income from it. So anyway, the last part, what I've been doing before that was as a organisation development consultant, working with organisations to try to help them see simple solutions to bring about a more humane work environment that got results. So that people actually understood each other's skills and strengths and utilised them. And we had a humane process in organisations, and I spent my life in that. But moved on to different systems. So I started off with just the individual development process, helping individuals develop their own mindsets in order to be more positive, more productive, more a better member of society, or a group, or a team, or whatever. Then moved on to organisations, groups, organisations, communities, and societies eventually. You're right over there.
That's right. This half. Sorry, Chris. Carry on.
No problem. So, individuals, groups, organisations. Now, a lot of us are aware of sort of the interactive processes necessary to get a group going together. So the sort of thing is, people will say, oh, we must have an agenda, or we must have a chairman. Now, there are hundreds of simple systemic processes in group work, in the individual mind, in organisations that cause beneficial behaviour and hundreds that cause harmful behaviour. And unfortunately, we're never really taught about the difference or how to adopt the successful ones. So that's where I came from. And I've been moving more into, from organisations, large organisations, international organisations and others, into communities, and then into society. What is it about in society? What are the things in society that cause this society to be going downhill, to become a tyranny? We need to move totally away from that and to identify those things we can do to move us into true democracy, peaceful, just, fair, equitable democracy. So that's really what this is all about. And I've developed, I suppose, about 10 or 12 courses of action that we can do as individuals and as groups and as communities to bring that about. And we need to bring it about quite quickly because the tyranny, the World Economic Forum and all the rest of us is bearing down on us more and more every year, and it's getting to the point where we will lose every ounce of our freedom. So we need to change that. One of the key things is understanding when it is a criminal offence to pay tax. Now, can I just ask, how many people here know when it is a criminal offence to pay tax? Oh, gosh. Well, sorry?
And you know it's going to war or to terrorism and stuff?
Yes, thank you. Broadly, that's it. The principle underpinning it is the old aiding and abetting issue. If you give money to somebody and you know or suspect that money will be used for a criminal purpose, you are assisting the crime. And what we do know is that when we pay tax, our government uses 10 to 20% of our money for criminal purposes, murdering men, women and children in the Middle East or Syria, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan and so on. And recently in Ukraine, our money is paying for depleted uranium weapons being sent to the Ukraine. Now, the people who will suffer will be the people of the Ukraine, regardless of whether they're Russians or Ukrainians or anybody. We've got to stop the killing. That's really the issue. So it's a criminal offence to pay tax if you know, and now it's in law, if you suspect that it may be used for a criminal purpose. In 2000, a new law came in as a result of an international convention, treaty, called the Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism, and Britain signed up to it. And none of these international treaties come into domestic law until they are ratified. That means that a country's parliament has to agree to it and bring it into our domestic law. And we did that in 2000, and it's called the Terrorism Act 2000. And it's probably one of the most important laws we've introduced. But of course, the government do not, but nobody in Parliament or anybody else tells us that we've passed it or what it means or what it says. So it's important for us to do the research and to say, no. One of the pieces of information I'll come on to later is the issue in section 15 of the Terrorism Act 2000, which makes it a criminal offence for a person to ask for money from someone else, to collect the money, or to pay it over to a third person if you suspect it may be used for the purposes of terrorism. And they define terrorism, this is Tony Blair's government and parliament at the time in 2000 defined terrorism as the use of firearms or explosives endangering life. And then a case came up in the Supreme Court in 2012, 2013, rather about then, Regina versus Gould. And that was a case all about the definition of what do we mean by terrorism. And the Supreme Court, in its ruling, said, well, actually, this appears to apply to the military and quasi-military activities of the British government. Now, that's an admission that the British government's activities overseas are terrorism and punishable in English law by up to 14 years in prison. So, unfortunately, our government never pays any attention to its own laws. Now, the second law is the International Criminal Court Act. This is also a very important law that was brought in as a result of 128 nations in Rome in 1998 signed the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. And after 60 years' work by the UN and other nations, we set up the first international criminal court with jurisdiction over 3 crimes, or 6 crimes in total, but 3 crimes particularly, worldwide. And the crimes are war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And so what we said was that if those crimes are taking place anywhere in the world, that is for the International Criminal Court to prosecute those leaders of those crimes. And we need a system, and it's set up in The Hague to do that prosecution. And when we enacted the International Criminal Court Acts, there was the International Criminal Court Act for England and Wales in 2001. There's also the International Criminal Court Scotland Act, 2001. That's because Scotland has a different legal system, and we have to do it slightly differently. Slightly different wording, but the important thing is there are 6 crimes that apply to every British citizen, from the monarch to the one-day-old 16-year-old, so all adults. The crimes are war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, and conduct ancillary to war crimes, conduct ancillary to crimes against humanity, and conduct ancillary to genocide. And those are the 6 universal crimes. If any British citizen is involved in any of those crimes anywhere in the world, they can be imprisoned, tried, convicted, and if convicted, punished for up to 30 years in prison. Now, that's the longest sentence in statute criminal law in this country. And in other states, they can get decapitated. But there's a few and far between, unfortunately, or fortunately. So it's very important to know the answer to that question, because everything I'm going to do tonight is based on the fact that our government has been breaking the law for more than 100 years. Very briefly, the world passed a convention after the First World War called the Convention for the Renunciation of War. And it's sometimes called the Coverdale Pact. And then in 1945, we signed the UN Charter. And the important phrases in the UN Charter are, we promised never to threaten or to use force, and to settle all disputes peacefully. And that's what our government agreed on our behalf, all the people of Great Britain, to do with the rest of the world. And not once in those 77 years, or whatever it is, have we upheld that promise. We've fought 28 illegal wars since 1946, murdering somewhere around 7 to 8 million people. And normally in this situation, at least a third of those are children. Since 2001 alone, most people will remember that now, when we went to war with Afghanistan and then Iraq and so on, we have fought 7 illegal wars, taken part in 7 illegal wars, murdering 2 million people, including 650,000 children. And every one of those has been paid for by us. We are providing the money that causes these deaths. Now, I want to just very briefly look back at the history of effective revolution. If you look at successful revolutions over the ages, you'll find that every single one of them starts with tax rebellion. So Magna Carta is a good example. Magna Carta, what happened there was that King John wanted to wage war in Aquitaine, asked the barons for the troops and the money to wage the war, and they said no, not until you agree to our demands. And they laid out 63 demands, and 5 days later at Runnymede, he agreed to them. And that became Magna Carta. And the important bit is that we changed 63 laws in a week. We had 63 new laws in a week. Now we need to do the same, or something similar. It may not be in a week, but within a year we can bring in new laws that create a decent society. But we've got to get rid of the current society. And that is the problem. The current governments and corporations that are really running the world, and bankers and all the rest behind the scenes, that are steering us into tyranny and the World Economic Forum. So in order to get rid of them, we need to, the most effective thing we can do is tax rebellion. It worked for Magna Carta, it worked in the Civil War in 1640s, was started because of the ship tax. The king wanted to introduce ship tax in Britain to all inland towns, as well as the previous payers who were coastal towns. That started the Civil War. American independence came about because the British government, the king at the time, wanted to introduce a stamp tax and tried to introduce stamp tax and tea taxes and other things to the Americans, and they said no, not without representation in Parliament, and they were refused representation in the British Parliament. So they became independent. The French Revolution, it was the bread taxes in Paris that stimulated that. The Russian Revolution was the land taxes that the peasants were getting thrown off or couldn't afford to work their land. The Indian independence came about because of the Salt Tax Rebellion. Mahatma Gandhi really got rid of the British because the 40,000 people, and then it spread across the whole country, said, no, we're not going to have this tax. Two in Britain that are important. One was in 1915, the Glasgow women's rent strike. The men of Glasgow had been sent off to the First World War to fight in the trenches, and the women were getting thrown out of their houses because they couldn't pay the rent. So they said, no, we're not having it. Together with the shipbuilders, they went on strike, and 2 months later the government brought in a new housing act that meant no increases in rents, no evictions, and that lasted right through till Mrs. Thatcher changed it in the middle of the 1980s, which stimulated the poll tax rebellion. So tax rebellion is a very, very important non-violent way of ensuring that the government does not have enough money to do all the nasty things that they do with their money, with our money. And if we stop paying it, we'll get around that.
Could you just answer the question, when is war legal?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Well, hopefully by the end of tonight you'll realise that, but it is never legal, basically, is the answer to that. The important bit is that the only time, the UN Charter specifies quite clearly, all nations have promised never to threaten or to use force. So that is the basic reason why war is illegal. We are all signed up to it, 195 nations. The other issue is that warfare, the only time when you can use armed force at all is Article 51 of the UN Charter, which says you may defend yourself with armed force if you are attacked by another nation, the armed forces of another nation. And that is the only time. And you may repel the attack, but you may not go back into their country and bomb them and kill them and their citizens and so on. You can repel them from your own country. And the method you use for doing it must be proportionate to the methods they use. So war is always illegal, basically, but we'll amplify that later. 7 wars, now 10 genocides. I've talked about the 7 military genocides. So the military genocide takes place when you kill a person because of their nationality, race, religion, or ethnicity. Now, we started killing Afghans in Afghanistan because they were Afghans, not because they'd done anything to us or they were attacking us or anything else. Same with Iraq. we went into Iraq, started bombing and killing them with using cruise missiles and other things. And every single person who was involved in that was, it was a crime of genocide. Now, in the law, in this country, genocide has 4 components. The 4 components are, firstly, the perpetrator killed or caused the death of 1 or more persons. Now, it's very interesting that most people think it has to be lots of people, but in fact, the law in this country, Section 51 and 52 of the International Criminal Court Act, make it quite clear it is 1 or more persons. The second thing is that those persons were members of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. The third one is that you did it intentionally. It was done intentionally and it wasn't an accident. Now, it's quite simple to prove, rather like one proves the difference between murder and manslaughter. Exactly the same applies with the genocide. You have to prove that those people have been killed intentionally by the perpetrators. So a good example was what Jack Straw said in Parliament in March the 19th, I think it was, 18th, 2003, when they had a debate about the Iraq War. Jack Straw, who was the Foreign Secretary, closed the debate by saying to everybody assembled in Parliament, well, there will be consequences, and we know what those consequences are. Some of our soldiers may be killed and injured. So too will innocent Iraqi civilians. I urge you to vote for the government tonight. Now that is definite evidence of intent to kill innocent Iraqi civilians. They've done nothing to us. Now that was in Parliament. And what really horrified me was that 412 MPs then went through the eye lobby, agreed to it, and we started the Iraq War. They all know perfectly well that bombing and killing people is a criminal offence, is wrong, and yet they all go for it all the time. So we have to find a way of stopping them going with that. It's appalling. Injustice. Oh, 3 of the genocides. There are 3 other ones, I'm sorry about this, related to the COVID experience of the last 3 years. We have the Midazolam murders that took place in the care homes. We have the removal of essential medical services from people, getting them sent home when they were badly ill and needed attention. And we have the poisonous inoculations. So that's 3 separate genocides that have taken place in the last 3 years. Every one of those people in this country was killed because they were a British citizen. Or most of them were British, or who it was anyway. We can prove that thousands of British citizens have not only died but have been seriously injured by the activities of our government, and that those activities in law are genocide. And yet nobody in this country does anything about it, particularly the prosecuting authorities, the police and Crown Prosecution Service. They avoid this all the time. We have to get back at that and do something about it. Injustice, I think, yeah, sorry.
What was the 4th component of genocide?
Sorry, thank you. The 4th one, you're very good at asking the right questions. Before I rush on. The 4th one is that it's part of a widespread policy. If it's just one individual who kills a lot of people as part of a thing, that's not genocide, that's murder or mass murder or whatever it is. It's not genocide. It has to be part of a policy of a group or a government. A widespread policy that is understood and goes across. So, for instance, 40,000 fatal attacks on Iraqis in a period of 3 years. A perfect example of a widespread policy to murder and kill Iraqi citizens. So that's that. Injustice. The other problem we have is that none of our leaders ever get prosecuted. 150 years, we haven't had a single one of our leaders prosecuted for war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide, or any of the other horrific crimes they've been responsible for. They get away with it all the time. And when one tries to do something about it, the pressure is on to make sure nothing happens at all. They always get away with it. They think they are immune from prosecution. In law, absolutely no, not. However, they get their lawyers to tell their other people that they are immune from prosecution. And that's going on all the time. There was a thing that came out from the Ministry of Justice, excuse me, in 2018 about the investigation and prosecution of crimes of universal jurisdiction. Those are the three crimes I've been talking about: war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide. And they say, of course, the British government will go for anybody at all in this documentation. And then 2/3 of the way through the thing, it's a section about immunity of state officials. And they claim that every state official is immune from prosecution. And it's just madness. Whereas Article 27 of the Rome Statute says this applies to every single... Let me try and get it up. Relies at least genocide. What they say is state officials are immune from criminal jurisdictions. This is an absolute immunity that applies to key figures involved in the conduct of international relations. Official act immunity can be claimed by all state officials. That's taken from that document. What the law says, Section 27 and others in the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal and other precedents, official capacity as a head of state or government, a member of government or parliament, an elected representative or government official shall in no case exempt a person from criminal responsibility under this statute. So, it's quite clear, that's Article 27 of the Rome Statute. It's brought into law in this country in the International Criminal Court Act. If you look at Section 78, it says this applies to the Crown and all servants of the Crown and all property of the Crown. But they just ignore that completely and say what we're doing is lawful and legal.
I read just about diplomatic immunity for someone who hasn't been captured by that definition. So I read somewhere, for instance...
Yes, there is a lot of it about, this is a generally agreed thing from the 1970s, I think, is that diplomats can be, in certain circumstances, immune from prosecution. But that doesn't apply to genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes.
Right.
And that's the important bit, is that they are immune from parking tickets and criminal prosecution in this country if they run over an innocent Brit, I think that woman, who, whatever it was. You know, that sort of level of it, but it's when it gets really serious and they start organising and getting involved in attacks on Iraq, Syria and so on. Every single person, including the monarch, is under this law. And unfortunately, Queen Elizabeth, she signed this in 2001, putting herself and every British citizen under the authority of an outside jurisdiction in The Hague, the International Criminal Court. That had never happened before, or certainly for 1600 years. I think it was that under Romans, we could get the top people may have been prosecuted in Rome and executed or whatever it was. But since then, we've been told that we have sovereignty and nobody in this outside can bring us to court for any of our actions. That changed on the 1st of September 2001. But of course they didn't tell us. Nobody told us about this. And so we don't know about it and we don't do anything about it. So on October the 7th, 2001, Tony Blair started the war with Afghanistan, committing crimes against humanity and war crimes by ordering troops to fire cruise missiles from the Indian Ocean, from our submarine in the Indian Ocean, into Kabul and Kandahar. He did that knowing that if a cruise missile lands and it will explode and anybody in the vicinity will get killed or seriously injured. And just by choosing to do that, if he'd just done it once and said, oh my God, I didn't expect to kill anybody, and we're not going to do it again, then we couldn't have prosecuted him for genocide. Or maybe a crime against humanity. He could prove it was accidental. But the fact that he then carried on for 40,000 further attacks on innocent men, women and children proves genocide. Now, we've put all this information to the Crown Prosecution Service. In fact, myself and my colleagues over about 6 years reported these crimes to every police force in Britain, 44 of them, to MPs, to peers, to, well, mainly to MPs, peers, and Crown prosecutors and police. And of those over 300 reports, only 5 got as far as the Crown Prosecution Service. But those did. It happened because of an accidental occurrence. 2 of my colleagues went into Marylebone Police Station and reported war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide for our leaders, Tony Blair, Jack Straw, all the rest of them. And there was a Danish policewoman on the desk, and she was over for 1 year on an exchange program, and so she just said, yes, of course, I'll report this. Great. And it just so happened that her detective inspector who'd just come on duty was an Irishman who was going back to Ireland 3 weeks later with retirement. And he said, I've been waiting for something like this for years. And so he knew how to go through the system and put it into the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity unit at Scotland Yard. Now, I didn't know that existed for a while. I don't know how many people have heard that. It's one of the most important police units in the country, and of course they never do anything, and there's probably hardly anybody there. But they have responsibility for prosecuting genocide, and they never do. So we went along. I got a phone call out of the blue from the Belgravia police, that unit, and they said, meet us at Belgravia police station and give us all your evidence. As a witness, what have you seen? So then I had 5 sessions of 3 hours of time over the next week or 10 days, going through all the evidence of each of the crimes that we were reporting and the 25 top people who were involved. Initially, for the first 2 hours, they thought, no, there's nothing to this, We're just here because we have to be. But after a couple of hours, they started to realize, no, this is absolutely clear. This is what the law says. This is what has happened. It's a crime. It's a criminal offence. We've got to prosecute it. So they passed it on to the Crown Prosecution Service. They had it for about a month, and then we found that the woman who had it she got promoted to Lancashire or somewhere. So she passed it on to the most junior person in the office, and he had it for about another 2 months. And then they got a letter from them saying that we're not going ahead with the prosecution of Blair, Straw, Hoon, Goldsmith and all the other people we had listed on the grounds that you have not provided evidence of intent to commit genocide, evidence of intent to commit crimes against humanity, or evidence of intent to commit war crimes. And we have provided massive evidence, statements from Parliament, from, the newspapers, made from television programs and everything else, which demonstrated the clear intent of our government to kill Iraqi civilians. They had really no other excuse to go in at all. Anyway, what happened was that they turned it down. Now, the interesting thing was the DPP at that time who turned it down was Keir Starmer. I noticed about 4 years ago, before he took over from Jeremy Corbyn, that he was saying, oh, well, I knew the war was illegal. And I thought, you two-faced, you're the one person in the country who could have started a criminal prosecution of our leaders, and he refused to do so. So he needs to answer for that. I'm determined. Very briefly, I'll go through this. The main causes of our problems, I think, are manipulation by the elite corporations and bankers. They are operating behind the scenes. They get our laws changed. They get our financing of different departments changed. All sorts of things happening. And basically, it's corrupt government institutions failing to do what they're paid to do by the taxpayers. So a good example is the Crown Prosecution Service. They're there to prosecute. our leaders for war crimes, and they don't do it, ever. And not in 150 years have we had a single British leader held to account for some of the atrocities that we've committed over that time. Next one is centralised decision making. For some reason over the last 100 years, all the decisions seem to go up to the small group at the top, and we're left with almost no decisions at all. In councils, in any part of public life, is always decided by the British government. Next one is corrupt political parties. They say this is what we're going to do, they put out a manifesto, and then they do the opposite. It's crazy. And we've got to do something about it, and I'm really determined to get rid of the whole political issue. We are human beings trying to do the best we can, forget about all this Labour, Conservative, left, right, and all the rest. It's a nonsense. As I mentioned earlier, no leader has been accountable for any of their bad decisions ever. And they just get away from them. So the reason, if someone isn't held to account, they carry on taking the decisions. I wasn't taken to account. I wasn't held to account for going into Afghanistan, so we'll fight Iraq, and then Libya, and then Syria, and we'll support the war in the Yemen, or the war in Palestine, or the war in Ukraine. They are never held to account for these horrendous crimes, and we have to find a way of holding them to account. So this is the underpinning behind the solutions, which I now want to put forward. So, the first thing is to expose the lies, publish the truth. I think it's very important that people should know some of the truth that I've been trying to get out tonight. We need to spread that. We need people to know what the UN Charter actually says. Article 41 of the UN Charter is quite clear. And that is the article that has been was brought into law in 1946 in the United Nations Act. It's just a one-page act. It's well worth having a look at it at some point. And it is headed Article 41. And the important bit within it is, there is a statement in Article 41 which says the Security Council may decide what measures, not involving the use of armed force, are to be employed to give effect to its decisions. Now, the British government, as you know, says, okay, we've been authorised under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter to go into Iraq. Resolutions 678, 687 and 1441 enable us to attack Iraq. It's absolute madness. So they leave the word not out of the law and say we have been authorised. And the thing that worries me is that the UN Charter is probably the one document known throughout the world, available to all of us. All we have to do is to read what it says in Article 41. And yet not one member of Parliament, not one peer, not one civil servant, not one armed military commander has done anything about it. We just go along with it. If they tell us it's lawful, we believe it. And we've got to stop that. So that's really the first thing, is to expose the lies they're telling us and the truth underpinning it. We must get at the truth. Reclaim our sovereignty, individual and community. I want to show you a way of doing that tonight, but we need to say, look, it's us that are sovereign human beings. It's not the government, it's not Parliament, it's not the monarch, it's us. We are individual, sovereign human beings. We take the decisions in a democracy. It's our role as individuals to decide how we're going to interact with other people in this situation. And providing we don't harm anybody, we need to take our own decisions. So we can do that. Operate taxation trusts. I'll go into this in a little bit more detail. The important thing that has come to me, because of my previous work as a consultant, I've found that the solutions always lie in the opponent's strengths. And one of the reasons why they have been so successful over the last 300 years is they set up these trusts, and they put all their money, huge amounts of money, in trusts in overseas tax havens. What I realised, and that way, lawfully, they avoid paying tax. So all the tax comes down to us. And the top 1% hardly pay any tax at all. It's horrendous. So, if we set up a taxation trust, what it means is that we say, okay, we're going to do the same thing. We put all our taxes into a trust for the government, and the government, as the beneficiary, can have that money on the condition that they use it for lawful purposes. And if they don't, then they don't get a penny. And we get it back at the end of the financial year. So I'll go into the detail about that, but that is probably the most important action we can take, is to stop paying for what's going on. We must stop paying for it. Every time you buy a cup of coffee, £2 for the coffee, 40p for the VAT, we know that 10% of that VAT will pay for or go towards the murder of another child in a place overseas or whatever it is. So we need to be aware of that. What happens to all taxes in this country is they all go into one pot, the government's consolidated fund. And there are 230 different taxes and income sources that make up the government's income for the year. Now, at the end of April 2022, the income in the consolidated fund was £915 billion. And there's 45 million, 47, say 50 million taxpayers. £915 billion is probably nearly £20,000 per person. I think that my maths isn't brilliant, but it's something like that. We need to be aware of the fact that all taxes, council tax, VAT, dog licenses, if they haven't done anything to do, or whatever it is, they all go into the one pot. And all expenditure is supposed to come out of the one pot, and that's been the case since 1787 in this country. So operate taxation trusts, and I will spend a little bit of time on that and go through the detailed document that you have in front of you. The next one is withdraw consent to government orders. We need to just say, no, I'm not consenting to that. You tell me that I have to pay you £2,000, £3,000 council tax. I don't consent. I know some of that is going to be used for criminal purposes. Not all of it, but some of it. And I won't have a single penny of it used for a criminal purpose, which includes me. I could suffer. Withdraw consent. Act through community cooperatives, limited liability. One of the reasons why our corporations and governments are so effective is they set up legal structures within which they avoid liability for their actions. So they have limited liability. Now that's a very important thing. Now we don't have that as individuals. We get charged and we are told we're liable for all our actions. So what happens with limited liability is that, say, a director of Big Pharma sells a lot of poisonous stuff to the British government, and then they're held to account. If they're ever held to account, it's a civil issue, and they're taken to court, and the company is fined, say, £3 billion. So it's the shareholders of the company who pay the fine, not the director who took the decisions which have caused the deaths. And this is the problem with civil law and criminal law. Civil law, all you can do is get remunerated for potential harms. But in criminal law, we need to start taking these directors to court through the police and Crown Prosecution Service and charging them with conduct ancillary to genocide. Now, conduct ancillary to genocide is an important understanding. It's the old aiding and abetting, Accessories and Abettors Act of 1861. Says that basically everyone who aids and abets a crime is guilty of the crime and can be charged alongside the main perpetrators. So if you fund, as a taxpayer, you fund a crime of genocide by Tony Blair, you, as well as Tony Blair, can be held to account in court. You will be held to account for a crime of conduct ancillary to genocide. And in fact, so will Tony Blair, because the genocide is actually committed by the soldier or sailor who fired the cruise missile, or who fired the gun, whatever it is. And it's the people who give the orders can only be prosecuted for conduct ancillary to the actual crime of genocide. However, they are the main focus of the Rome Statute. It's all about focusing on, as I showed you earlier, the head of state, parliament, and so on. The point I want to make about this is we need to set up legal structures that enable us to have the same power as the big corporations. Now, the law changed in 2014 in the Community Benefits and Societies Act of 2014. Cooperatives were allowed for the first time to have businesses as well as individuals as members. And it's what's called a multi-stakeholder cooperative. Now, if all of you set up a cooperative together to really take action in the area, that's great, but now you can organise, all your local businesses can also participate in it. But they will only have one vote, just as you will only have one vote. So it brings the big corporations, say you bring BP or Shell, the petrol station, into the cooperative. They only have as much power as one individual. And so all of you, outnumbering all the businesses, can always take charge of a multi-stakeholder cooperative. Now, there's an important thing I want to point out about that. There's two types of corporations in this country. Corporations owned and controlled by shares and shareholding, and corporations or companies owned and controlled by guarantee. So what's important is to have a multi-stakeholder limited liability cooperative with a guarantee. Now what that means is your limited liability is limited to your guarantee. If the whole organisation goes broke and the creditors are knocking on your door for the assets, all they can do is take the amount that you have guaranteed as a member. So if you guarantee £1 as a member of the cooperative, that's all they can ever take from you. If it's a shareholding thing, then it's the value of your shares. If you put in £100 in shares in the first place, you will lose that £100. The important issue is that if you are a shareholder and you have a cooperative limited by shares, then people with very large amounts of money can come in and offer huge sums of money to each of your members to sell out, and they can buy up the shares, and once they have 51% of the shares, then they can do what they like. And so we've got to stay away from this power of money completely and go by limited by guarantee rather than by shares. Prosecute leaders and taxpayers for genocide. I think I've said enough about that, but we've got an awful lot more information, and maybe on another date I can go into more detail about how do we actually start prosecutions for both taxpayers and senior bank directors and others, as well as our military commanders and so on, and our politicians. So very quickly, that was the lie, which is that our wars are authorised by the Security Council, operating under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. Chapter 7 is Articles 39 to 51, and the important one is Article 41, which says, quite clearly, decide what measures not involving the use of armed force are to be employed to give effect to its decisions. I find it utterly horrendous they leave the word not out, and they tell us, and we go along with it, and say, okay. Now, what I'd like to do is to go into a bit more detail about that. In front of you, hopefully, you have a declaration and deed of sovereignty. Now this, if we can have a look at it, this is your passport of freedom. Thank you. Freedom from ever having to pay tax again, and that's very important. When you have filled in this thing by the end of the evening or wherever, and witnessed it and put a date to it, you have. You need some more.
No, I think we're okay. Yeah.
That's okay. One over here, please.
Yep.
Here you go. What was it? Wanted. Thank you very much. That's the other one. You've got one of those as well. That's a different one. It's just this one we want for the moment. Okay, so it's headed the Declaration of Sovereignty and Deed of Discretionary Revocable Conditional Trust and Withdrawal of Consent to Illegal Taxation. What I'm trying to do here is to do three things at once and to save you the problem by having it all carefully worded in such a way that you can refuse to pay tax ever again if the government uses any of it for any unlawful purpose. So going through the Declaration of Sovereignty, it's quite clear. It says, I, a sovereign man, woman, resident in wherever you are, resident in the United Kingdom, whatever. Now that is enough of a statement. The important bit is to remember it's not the government, not Parliament, not the monarch, it's you. So you declare your sovereignty. The second thing is, this is a discretionary revocable conditional trust. Let me just explain those terms. Discretionary means that the trustee of your trust has discretion whether to roll the money over at the end of the year to another thing, or to give it back to the settler, which is you. So you have to have some discretion for the trustee. Revocable means that it can be revoked if the conditions are not met. So if the government has not met your tax conditions by the end of the financial year, your trustee can revoke their potential for getting hold of that money completely and pass the money to the secondary beneficiary. So it's revocable rather than being irrevocable. And it's conditional. And you'll find later on, we go through a few of them, on paragraph 8 are the conditions that you want met for them to be able to claim the tax from you. In fact, let's just go through that now. If you could turn to the back page, page 8, you'll see 4 subheadings there. I further declare and say that if, prior to the end of the financial year, I receive incontrovertible documentary evidence from a court of competent jurisdiction that the primary beneficiary has done 4 things. 1, has ended all involvement in the criminal acts identified at paragraph 2 above, and that's the wars and the attacks on innocent civilians and so on. It's all detailed in paragraph 2. 2 is acting in accord with the domestic and international laws specified in paragraphs 3 to 5 above. It is important before you actually operate this deed of trust for you to understand the pages 2 and 3 in this document, because those are the laws on which you are taking a firm stance. And if you ever get to court and you can't quote those or don't understand what it is you've agreed to, you may well lose your trust. So try to make sure you understand. It's all in plain English, like that issue of not involving the use of armed force. If you quote that and you say, look, I'm quite clear, that's what the UN Charter says, that applies to every person in the world, and it applies to me and to you, the judge. If I do anything to aid and abet the use of armed force, I'm committing the world's worst crimes. So basically, what you're saying here in part 2 is acting in accordance with the domestic and international laws specified on those 2 pages. Third one is, has granted me complete and full immunity from any and all claims, charges, liability, etc. And the last one is, has initiated with the Directors of Public Prosecution of England and Wales and Northern Ireland and the Lord Advocate for Scotland criminal proceedings against 1,000 of the leading instigators, perpetrators, financiers, investors, advisors, company directors, public officials, and natural persons complicit in the criminal acts of the primary beneficiary identified at paragraph 2 above. So those are your conditions, and they're pretty tough. Obviously, if the government meets them, and there are 1,000 of our leaders on trial, or criminal proceedings are started at least, then you will have to pay the tax if it meets all of those 4 conditions. But if it doesn't, then the whole thing switches round. And if you look at the very last paragraph, paragraph 9, and the last 4 lines of paragraph 9, it says, then this conditional revocable discretionary trust will be revoked on the date stated in paragraph 1, and all money and or assets held in trust for the primary beneficiary will be carried forward on the same terms and conditions of the following financial period, or at the discretion of the trustee, return to me, the settler, the secondary beneficiary. So basically, this makes sure that this is a lawful document. If we didn't have this distinction between primary beneficiary and secondary beneficiary, we would be committing a crime. The important thing to keep in mind is that you, once you have signed this and dated it and witnessed it, then you have paid your taxes. And that's the nice thing about it. You've paid your taxes, but you've paid it on condition, rather than unconditionally, which is what we do all the time. And we need to start putting conditions on the use of our money. And that's really what this is about. It's the very same thing as a will. For instance, if you sign a will and say, I'll leave £100,000 to Freddie, my grandson, providing he doesn't marry Julia and providing he joins the family firm or whatever it is by the age of 25, then the beneficiary, the grandson, can't get the money if he hasn't met those conditions. So if he has married Julia or run off and gone somewhere else and is not a member of the company, then the money goes to whoever is as secondary beneficiary in the trust. So it's exactly the same as a sort of will. It's called a living will, this one. It happens while you're still alive rather than as your testamentary evidence after your death.
So, how does that work?
Right, it's a good question. Basically, the employer or institution that is deducting PAYE from you or from any of your friends and children or whatever, they are committing a criminal offence under Section 15 and 17 of the Terrorism Act and Section 52 of the International Criminal Court Act by taking your money and handing it to the government. And they are committing a much worse criminal offence than you. So the important thing is to point out to the employers to say, look, we've just discovered it's a criminal offence to hand this money to you or to the government, and you are taking it out of my salary without my consent and handing it over to the government. That is the worst crime you can commit. And you, as a director of the company or manager or whoever it is, can be tried, convicted, punished, and put in prison for up to 30 years. They don't know this. Nobody in this country knows these laws. So what we've got to do is get the word out to employers, to councils, to banks, to others. You know, it's the same with repaying a mortgage.
And in your experience, does it make any difference at all to an employer?
Oh yes, it's starting to, and that's why I'm bringing it up today. I've had a rather rough ride over the last 20 years. I discovered this in 2003, stopped paying council tax, for instance. And I haven't paid any council tax since 2003. Now, after about 10 years, they got a bit fed up with me. In 2013, they finally sent me to prison. Oh, they made me bankrupt in 2006, which was another issue, but for a different sum of money. In 2013, I was sent to prison and but because the judge paid absolutely no attention to the law. I said, look, this is the International Criminal Court Act, this is what it says, and I'm trying to uphold it. And she said to me, that doesn't apply in this court. It's sort of, up until then I had the assumption that our courts were genuine operations. I have been badly disabused of that ever since.
And Chris, isn't this the bigger problem that we face, because we're sort of becoming more and more aware, and Dijon has educated a lot of us, and Mark Horn, and of course yourself, are all raising the issue that the courts are acting illegally. They're not actually following the law.
Yes.
They're all in it. They're in the club and we're not part of it.
Absolutely.
So how...
So this is why the trust document is very important. You'll find that probably all the senior judges and others have got overseas trust documents, or money in trust somewhere for their relatives or whoever. So they abide by trust documents. And it was only in 2016, after I'd been sent to prison for 3 times, I said, I've got to find a different way of doing this. This is not working. So that's when I sort of caught on to the importance of trusts and paying the tax into trust. And say, yeah, I'm very happy to pay the tax, but I want you to use it for lawful purposes only. And they will uphold that. And what's happened is that I've been doing that since 2016, and of course they don't take me to court, they just ignore me. It's the best thing they can do, is to say, ignore this guy, he's just a nutcase, so we carry on with all the other, fools who pay. So, and it is important to keep that in mind. So for instance, they've sent me bills, Hastings Borough Council, for about £9,500 over the last 6 years. And every year I get another document saying, all right, originally they tried to tot it up for the first 3 years, but now they just ignore it, and at the beginning of every year, after I haven't paid twice or whatever it is, they say, you now owe me £322 or whatever it is. Our records show that you are in debt to us £322. So it should really be 9,000, whatever it is that I haven't paid, but they just roll it over every year. And the best thing, they ensure that it never goes to court, because if it did, it's absolutely watertight case.
Has this document been looked over by trust lawyers, I wonder?
Yeah, well, I've tried, yes. About 4 different trust lawyers have had looked at it. Some of them are very excited and say, this is great, this is just tremendous, but we haven't thought of it in this way because people have always assumed that paying tax is lawful. But as soon as they discover it's not, then this is an excellent way of holding the government to account. So 2 or 3 have looked at it, and if you can get others to look at it, I had one the other day who actually has added a few clauses in, and the next version will do that, will also cover all the injuries and so on caused by 5G and 6G. And we're going to have a whole section in there about that.
I can send it to a statutory trust lawyer, and he just said that should it declare the jurisdiction on it as well? Which laws it operates under, if it's the laws of England and Wales?
Well, we've got 2 pages of the laws that we are saying we are trying to uphold. There are various lawyers who will nitpick, if you know what I mean, and try to destroy it because they want you to pay them to come up with a better one.
But this guy was a good guy, he was an awake lawyer.
Oh, good. Well, I'm very happy. I mean, I'm just a normal person trying to put it all together, and if somebody's got some good ideas, as I said, this woman who came to me last week with a really good idea about the 5G stuff, I will incorporate it in the next one. So if there are things like that where you think a sentence should go, and this is under the law of England and Wales, or one of the problems is that there are separate laws in England and Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And so I tried to just make it as common to everybody in Britain as I can, but I'm very happy to add any extra things in. So if you have another conversation with him, give him my email or phone number and I'd love to talk to him.
Yeah.
Because it always needs to be improved.
Is there any practical situation with PAYE?
Sorry?
On a practical situation dealing with PAYE, if you tell your employer you don't want them to pay the tax on your behalf, where do you want them to put the equivalent of your tax payment into? You've got to set up a bank account that they pay into, or...
Well, what we suggested is a letter there, and I'll try and make sure that people have access to it, is that they should set up a trust on behalf of all employees as the secondary beneficiary, paying the PAYE to the Revenue and Customs on condition that they act lawfully, and if they don't, it comes back to the employees who have had it deducted from their salaries.
So the employer would set up that trust then?
Absolutely.
Right.
Or stop doing it in the first place and leave it back to the individuals. But that's a simple way for them to abide by the law, both war law and the Revenue and Customs.
My tax is deducted by my pension company.
Yeah.
So I would write to them.
Yes.
Say, this is what I've signed. I don't want you to pay my tax. I want you to set up a trust fund, or I can set up a trust fund myself that money can be paid into, and then at the end of the year, I get it or not get it.
Because it's them doing it, they need to set it up on their behalf, or just send you the money and not deduct it. I have the same. I've been retired for 17 years now, so I have the same thing with my pension company. The first few years, they just ignore me completely. I'm now getting sort of letters. Well, we're considering your your documentation. They still haven't actually stopped deducting it, but I'm working on it. And the important thing in this sense is we need more of us together doing this with some of the... Yeah, exactly. I've been working for too long on my own with one or two colleagues and so on. They can pick us off or ignore us, and they often do. So let's do things together and make sure that we really start to hold these guys to account. Some of the amounts of money they send to the British government are unbelievable. I had somebody just 2 days ago saying, look, I've got a bill of about £500,000. Can I use this for this? I said, yes, of course, let's do it straight away and see what happens. And when we start getting big sums like that, I've already had several small sums that say my stuff has been ignored and they just cancel it every year. Woman in South London sent in a declaration and deed plus a letter to the Revenue and Customs just before the end of in January last year, and at the end of the financial year they sent her an accounting and it said £998 owed, £998 paid, to pay 0.00.
Wow.
So that was a letter from the Revenue and Customs. Now, unfortunately, there are 80,000 people in the Revenue and Customs, and they don't all operate the same way. They're all different individuals. They don't have a manual about any of this, so they don't know how to handle it. So it's not easy. You can't expect a standard response. I've been sending letters and encouraging others to send letters to Jim Harrow, who is the collector of taxes in Whitehall, in charge of it all. And he just sends back, or gets one of his juniors to send back a Ronioed letter. What do I mean? Standard letter saying, that we've gone through the complaints procedure, first level and so on. And if you're still dissatisfied, you can go to the second level or to the adjudicator or whatever it is. I mean, it's standard stuff. They don't know what to do about it, so they just ignore it and send out the normal things. So eventually we have got to, by force of numbers and the quantity of money we are not paying, force them into court about it.
Are you trying to get retrospective rebate?
That's even better, yes. I mean, basically every penny you have paid...
I've just realised I've paid for the last 30 years all this legal money. Can I have it back, please?
Yes, exactly. Well, actually, the date you would need to do it from is the 7th of October 2001. The reason for that is that was the day we went into Afghanistan after the 9/11 thing and started killing people in breach of the International Criminal Court Act, which had come in on the 1st of September. So every penny you've paid since the 7th of October 2001 has been a criminal offence. And we need to start saying, we claim it back.
You just do that with a direct debit.
So cancel any direct debits, anything else.
Well, you say you paid it in error and then
Well,
someone else has done that before.
Well, let's try it. Yeah, I mean, if you can get that from the direct debit system, that'd be fantastic.
You don't ask for it back from the council there.
You get the direct, yeah. I suppose that got a 5 year sort of limit on.
There's no limit.
Is there no limit?
There's no limit.
Question right at the back.
Yeah, so I have a SIP, self-invested personal pension, which is all the money that I've been putting in. And I've got it with a SIP company, but I've kind of invested it into gold. And I said to them, I don't want to pay a penny to the government, which is going to take, 25–30% of it, taxation. And I said, no, I want you to send me the whole thing because I want to buy the gold and not just have it in the gold. And I've had about 3 calls with them, and they said, no, we have to do this. The government say we have to send them in. So this is perfect, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. You need to send stronger and stronger letters.
Yeah.
Now, there is a document, I think you've got 3 documents. One that says Lawful Tax Rebellion. You've got a Declaration of Sovereignty, and one other document. I don't know, have people got it? It's
Some steps on using tax.
That's it. Very briefly, this is the sort of thing. Now, we're putting out quite a lot of these things, and what we suggest you do is pick and choose from various sentences and make up your own letter. We don't want too many just standard letters, all worded exactly the same, going out. The more variations there are, the better. But make sure that the main points are made. And that's a good example of a letter that goes out to councillors. And we're starting to get some responses, but not many. They're just ignoring it. They don't know what to do. Okay. Yes, question.
When it comes to trusts, are we supposed to register every trust now on the government website?
No. No, that's not the way we do trusts in this country. Think of it as your personal living will. As long as you are satisfied that there are several things that have to be done in any trust, and they're all in here. So you have to make a deliberate intention to put money, to give money to a beneficiary. And that is all written in here. You have to have a trustee. You have to make sure that it is lawful, it's all lawful. And providing that, you can just scribble it on the back of an envelope, and that will be accepted if it is done correctly. So even you don't need to register it with the government, but if you do want to send them a copy of it, never send your original. Your original belongs to your trustee, not to you as a settler, but to you as a trustee. And that is a difference, that's an important difference in law, because the trustee has to implement the conditions of the trust, or the terms that are put into the trust. And so they have to pay the money over to the government if the government meets the conditions.
You've got more information on that somewhere, like on Telegram or on internet or something?
I'm trying to put something together. I haven't got a website at the moment. I'm trying to get one together. Jono here is helping me we're hoping to get something out in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
And we'll try and get, as soon as we have, we'll send if you leave your name and email and so on through the systems, we'll make sure local groups.
We've got pen pad up here, so please anyone who hasn't put their email down, please make sure you do. Or actually, we'll just have a separate page for people that do want the information, so we can keep you in the loop.
Fine, but we'll make sure that you get it. We'll send one here so that it can be passed around to anybody who wants. Okay, and that hopefully in the next 4 weeks or so.
Is the council tax going to the same central
Yes.
fund that you described. From
That's the important thing. Councillors don't know that. They like to say, oh, we spend it on the bins or whatever.
Yeah, so it does go to that central fund.
Absolutely. The process is important. What happens is that all taxes, whatever they are, go into the consolidated fund. So the moment it gets credited to the council account, that actually belongs to Parliament. There are hundreds of different accounts, but they all belong to Parliament, and that is the consolidated fund, all the money that goes in. And as I say, it's £915 billion, and if you look on the government website, you'll see that last year it was about 40 billion in council tax.
I've recently just had a rebate from the DVLA, and that actually I've got the picture on my phone.
Oh, brilliant.
That says that it is on behalf of the Paymaster General for HM Government, and it was signed off by the Assistant Paymaster General. Yeah, it's got this.
Brilliant.
And that comes out of the account, which is a DVLA trust.
Yeah,
So
they've
the
got...
the government is setting up trusts as well, aren't they?
Oh, yes. They have hundreds of these situations. You know, I mean, it's just appalling the way they manipulate it. But remember that in terms of the accounts, it is all one consolidated fund.
I also stand on the fact that all tax is unlawful anyway.
Yes.
So, I mean, I haven't paid income tax since 2019.
Well done.
I've got no bother from it whatsoever. I just ignore the letters. I do not interact with them. Yeah? I don't interact with any corporations. I laugh or chuck it in a bin. If they do ever get hold of me, I was thinking of just paying it off with a promissory note.
Yes.
Yes.
It's just a bill of exchange. That comes under the Bill of Exchange Act of 1882. I mean, all money's fake anyway. So, you know what I mean? Worse. Talk about, here's a piece of paper, do what you want with it.
Absolutely.
And, whether that will stop the system, I don't know.
Well, I think it's all of these things together. We need to incorporate every good idea into the same process and operate it and try it out. There's an awful lot of them up there who haven't a clue what's going on. And if that works, let's spread it around.
Yeah.
I love the idea of a promissory note. That's what they give to us.
I'm also willing to get myself in big trouble with the traffic commissioner because I run my own. I actually signed agreements with a guy called Kevin Rooney. Now he's probably the only living man that puts his name to anything as a title. Yeah, I just had speeding fines come through, and it's signed on behalf of the traffic team.
Yep.
Yeah, of Devon Cornwall Constabulary on behalf of the Chief Constable. There's no names, except with the Traffic Commissioner, it's Kevin Rooney, is an actual man that I have signed obligations to do with running my truck. Now, I would like to put it to him that I've got all these rules and regulations that if an accident happens with my truck, I may injure someone or a lot of people. That's fair enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why aren't there regulations on Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics on these machines? I'm ex-army, I know what it's about. These machines are designed to murder and maim people, aren't they?
Yeah.
So let's have some obligation. How many people can you kill today? Let's put a cap on it. Because I can only drive 9 hours a day, and I've got to have rests and breaks and so on and so on. Do you know what I'm saying? And we need to play their system against them.
Absolutely, yeah, that's the principle.
Have fun with it.
Yes.
So file your tax return and say to HM, it's a tax return. I'm filing it, I'm telling you what I was meant to pay, but I want it returned to me.
Yeah.
And you start an argument then, because all of it is phonics and spell casting, which is why we have spelling, okay? If you're up in front of a magistrate, he looks at a sentence of the sentence that you've written through a writ, and he'll give you a sentence.
Yes.
It's just an exchange of nonsense, isn't it?
I agree with you. And really what I'm just trying to do is add some more nonsense to it.
I never paid much attention to Charlie Battenberg, who's just been coronated, whatever you want to call it. However, I did look in depth at Elizabeth's speech. Is it 1956 when she was coronated?
53.
53. If you go back and listen to what she's actually saying, she's got control of her trust.
Yeah.
And she says that in her speech. And she says that you were pledged to her.
And we pay no attention to this. As you
Exactly.
said, this is all rubbish. So let's say we are sovereign human beings, not the monarch.
You've got your own crown, haven't you?
Exactly.
Yeah. They abide by the crown and the bar association. Where you've got your crown, your left temple, and your right temple. They've got their temple bar associations that they run through,
Yeah.
haven't they? So you've got a trinity.
Yeah.
You know, a meeting of minds, haven't you?
Absolutely.
And also use your passport as well, because that gives you protection by Her Majesty's Secretary of State,
Yes.
that you can pass freely without let or hindrance.
Yeah.
So if you were to waive that, these officials, would that help you?
Well, I think the important bit that I'm trying to do is to get them to look at their own criminal laws. I think these ideas are brilliant, and if it works, let's use it. But the idea I'm trying to add to the pot is the fact that we have been deceived about the criminal law we've agreed with the rest of the world. We break it every year, and our taxpayers are paying for those breaches. And as taxpayers, we must stop paying the money that helps them wage these wars and get into mass murder and genocide. It's added to all the other activities that are going on, you know, in common law, in natural law, in lots of other different systems. Let's use everything we possibly can to stop what is going on and to create a decent democracy. Let me just finish off on this Declaration of Sovereignty and Deed of Trust. It's 10 to 9. Nearly. So I want to cover a couple more things. I would like to say that you are the settler. The settler is the person who puts the money in trust. You are also the trustee, and you can be of your own trust. So you put a different hat on, and that gives you different legal responsibilities. You must meet those legal responsibilities, and one of them is to separate the money from the settler's account. So you will need to take some cash out of your normal account and put it somewhere else. Now, we used to be able to do that in a trust account, but they've closed the possibility of doing that, knowing that this sort of thing is happening. So now you have to put it into a box or a cabinet or a folder or something at home. What you do is you put the original of this document, signed, filled in, witnessed and dated, plus say 5% of the money you owe. And now you can put that as in cash, you can write a check, or you can write a promissory note. I love the idea of writing a promissory note for say £500,000.
Have you thought about posting it to yourself, recorded delivery?
Well, I've found it.
Then you've got the postal service.
I've been told about this, but if you want to do that, do it. I don't think it's necessary under the trust documentation, but I may be proved wrong, and if I am, I apologise, and I'll change the process.
Who would you get to witness it?
And not a family member.
That's what I'm saying, yeah, obviously some kind of official. Who would you recommend?
Well, I mean, any one of your friends here.
Okay.
Somebody who knows you and can say, yes, that signature is allied to this person, I witnessed it.
What about one of your constituents, like Jacob Rees-Mogg?
Well, you could try with him, I'm sure he would do it.
You sure? You think he wouldn't do it?
Well, he might, I don't know.
He'd have to be, because he's been elected, hasn't he?
No, but this is a different issue. A witness to a signature is a different process, and he has to know you and know your signature.
Right. Okay.
Or see you sign it, that's the important bit. So,
can I ask about the money that you said to put aside in a box or a folder or something like that? Could you put it aside in a separate bank account?
well, you can if you can, yes, but it's in the name of the trustee, so you have to make sure that it's in a separate, because you are the trustee as well as the thing, you just need to make sure that if it ever gets to court in the long run, you can show quite evidence of the fact you have separated it from your main lot of money. Okay? I just want to point out there's absolutely no risk at all in getting this signed, witnessed by somebody else and dated and put into a box or something at home. You don't have to use it, but if you ever have to use it, you can go right back to the date you signed this trust. Because that was the date you took action over the illegality of tax. And you say, I am paying all my taxes in future, or whatever the dates are on here. And that is the important bit. You have paid your taxes, so they can't get you for not paying tax.
It's me again. What about tax like petrol and stuff like that? And when you go shopping, you can't just go there and say, sorry, I'm not paying that because I've got a declaration of sovereignty.
Yes. What we're trying to do is to take some of the big companies to court.
Okay.
We need to start prosecutions of company directors for handing over, say, BP or something, petrol from a BP station. We need to charge the directors of BP with conduct ancillary to genocide for handing over all the taxes they've got from drivers, all the PAYE and national insurance that they take from their employees, all the taxes they pay for taking oil out of the North Sea, and so on. It's a huge sum of money every year, and if we get some of those directors in court charged with conduct ancillary to genocide under Section 52 of the International Criminal Court Act, or Article 25(3)(c) of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, just getting one of those people convicted will change the whole situation in this country. And so that's really why we, instead of having to train everybody on the laws of war, we need a small group of people definitely focusing on charging some of our senior politicians and senior corporate directors and others who are really causing all the problems. So I know it's a bit indirect, but I think that's almost the only way we can go. And we have to come up against that problem about our courts being corrupt. We've got to find a way of getting somewhere in the Crown Prosecution Service or in the police, there must be police officers who are willing to uphold the law.
Have you looked at the constable's oath that they swear allegiance to?
Yeah.
The very last statement says, I will discharge the duties thereof. So they're discharging everything that they're meant to be standing for. Have you looked at that?
Well, I don't. No, I haven't. I mean, if any,
I will uphold. I've got fundamental human rights and freedom of passage. I'll be impartial. I will discharge the duties thereof. They've got rid of them, and it's the same as the president. He executes the office of president. He kills it. Gets rid of it. It's all a joke, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know. So, like I said, I can't wait to go to court. You know what I mean? I can find it hilarious. But I don't ever seem to go.
Well, I'm all for what you're trying to do, and I will support it if I can. As I say, I'm trying a slightly different route, and we need to link all of these things together and do it as much as we can, as often as we can, with as many people as we can, to start to change the situation. Absolutely, we need a different system, longer term. But this is the first steps and not the detail. I'll go into detail on the sort of thing, other things we can do, other courses of action on some other dates, because there are a whole range of other things we can do to change a tyranny into a true democracy. And one of them is the sort of Magna Carta of 2024, or call it Carta Populi, the People's Charter of 2024, will say this is the sort of situation, these are the laws we want, and we're going to force you to put them into place, rather like they did in 1215. There are lots of things in that area. So I don't want to dismiss your points. I just want to say, yeah, it's a good point. Let's make sure they're all used together. Now, there was one or two other people who had a question, so we're virtually ruined for that.
Yeah, this is for individuals.
It is. It's designed for individuals, and what we want is as many individuals, because we all have different tax responsibilities, different council taxes, different income taxes, and so on. We want the individuals to sign these things up. But it won't be really powerful until 1,000 individuals have signed this, get together, and then start to act together with the individual trusts in implementing the conditions of the trust, or ensuring the conditions are met, and starting to prosecute tax collectors or councillors or whoever.
In your documents, have you put a beneficiary and an administrator?
Yes. The beneficiary, we have an administrator because it's you are the trustee to administer the trust.
Put themselves down as the administrator and the beneficiary.
Well, if you can see things, if you go through this and you see things that I need to change and can give me a good reason for doing it, please do get in touch with me, because as I say, this is work in progress. Must be version 24 of the thing, and every 2 months or so I'm updating it and trying to improve it to make sure it gets tighter and tighter. So please, if you see things that are wrong with it, please do let me know. Right, so other questions. It's nearly 9 o'clock. What time do we have to be out of here?
10 hours.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
I have 2 years now of not paying installments on inheritance tax. And they just seem to be big. Should I leave it at that and just keep not paying, or put this in?
Both. Don't pay ever any more tax, and make sure you sign this and have it witnessed and dated, and from then on you have paid all the taxes that you are being asked to pay, and you pay them all on this document.
And that document you keep at home?
Yes.
Unless you copy it and send it off to various people?
Never get rid of it, because this is the instructions to your trustee.
Right.
The legal instructions to your trustee. You can send copies wherever you like, but never get rid of the originals. And keep it for years.
To HMRC?
Sorry?
You can send a copy of that to HMRC?
Yes.
Okay.
And what I would suggest is to HMRC, in order that they understand what it's all about, send them a copy of that lawful tax resistance article, because that tries to put it into context. I hope when you read it, together with that and your declaration and deed, you can write a letter that makes all the points you want to make.
Have you put on there that needs to be written in blue ink as well?
Do they?
That way you can't copy the blue ink there, so no one can contaminate or interfere with it.
Okay, well I try and recognise that in the instructions. If you want to sign it in blue ink, please do.
Or blue or red, and just make this, the original copy is in red ink.
Right.
You see what I mean? So then future copies will say that on there as well.
Excellent.
Do you see
Okay.
what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I'll try and get that into the next new version. Question here, yes.
Obviously, different amounts are going to be paying different taxes for the various organisations. How do you work that out?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
When you've got to put down the amount that you can send to pay, obviously,
how much? Yeah.
Will be paying different amounts, because my taxes come there, my pension, and then my council taxes is a different thing. So how do you work out?
Well, but what I do is put a sum in there that I think is the total that I'm being asked to pay in the top line, and then put a very small percentage of that into a box at home.
Oh, so you put a rough estimate?
Yeah, £5,000, £10,000, whatever it is. I mean, I was talking to this guy last week. His bill is over £500,000, so he has to put. It's almost not long enough to put to fit it in. But anyway, yeah, there's a question here.
So you don't fill out tax return as a self-employed?
I don't anymore anyway, because I've been retired for 17 years.
But when you fill out tax return, was that how you entered the contract?
Again, you better ask this guy over here. Sorry, what's your name again? Phil. Have a word with Phil, because he obviously knows more about it than I do. And I reckon, if you just ignore these things completely, that's one way out of it. You can, as somebody else has done, put in a tax return, but pay no attention. The important bit is never pay it.
Or offer to pay in sterling.
Yeah.
So like my
Or promissory note.
My accountant fills out the tax return, so I would say don't fill it out, or do fill it out, but I'm not going to pay it.
get him to understand that he is committing a criminal offence. If he, give him one of these and really work it through with him, and the letters. And I think it's important that we get more and more accountants understanding what they're doing. I haven't found an accountant yet who can answer that question: when is it a crime to pay tax? I mean, it's extraordinary, but they can't answer it because they're so in bed with the revenue and customs that they just automatically assume we just have to generate tax and send it to the revenue and customs.
Well, they're making money as well, aren't they? Because
Absolutely.
they make a lot of money on the tax returns, so they're going to lose business.
Well, this way, you can say, look, will you, and from now on, I want you to help me and all my friends fill in a new form of this, and you can send the letters to the revenue and customs on our behalf and so on, and we'll pay you for that.
Yes.
I'll pay you 10% of all savings I make from not paying tax. So it could be a really good business for a good accountant. So any more? Thank you.
Chris, on the verge of setting up a business, which I'd love to launch as a multi-stakeholder limited liability cooperative. Maybe we can talk about that sometimes. It strikes me as like an employee benefit, it's really. To be, have this explained at the outset that you pay no tax if you come to work with a new company.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is it might have the wherewithal to sort of replicate your presentation in communities, because you're only one and you're doing a sterling job, but you're only one. This needs to be going on all over the place.
Yes, it does. I mean, when we set up this, we tried to say one of the things we'd like to do is to decentralise decision making. At the moment, all the decisions about how our money will be spent are made by 2 or 3 people, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Prime Minister, once or twice a year, they make all the decisions. We don't want that at all. We need to make the decisions. So in order to do that, we need 650 multi-stakeholder, limited liability, platform, community co-ops set up in every constituency, one for every constituency at least, and maybe 2 or 3, but at least one. And we then bring the rule-making powers back to ourselves. We decide the rules of operation in that community, that cooperative. That's the exciting bit. Instead of them telling us, these are the rules you will operate by. So it really reverses the whole power thing, and having a really effective multi-stakeholder, limited liability, platform, community, co-op is an excellent structure within which to do that. Does that help?
Oh, I'd love to talk about this.
Yeah, right. Well, again, we can do a lot more. Jono here is very good at understanding it, and I would recommend that you exchange emails, and he can help enormously on just this issue. Well, I mean, I'd say just this issue. I mean this issue.
Do you suggest we set up a trust fund for income tax as well as council tax? Or can
Everything.
Be lumped together in one fund?
Yeah, this actually, if you put it, the total of all taxes you have to pay as an individual, income tax, VAT, stamp duty, inheritance tax, whatever it is, all of these things. Lump it all in together, and once you've done that, that is your trust of all your potential debts.
Sorry, Chris, is each year moving forwards? Each year moving forwards, you add it all in at this point? Or do you do one each year?
You can choose to just carry the same one on next year. That trustee can decide to do it. I would recommend doing a fresh one because the situation will be different in a year's time. And you may have been a different demand that you really want to incorporate and so on. And by then we will have a different document with 5G and 6G written into it and 1 or 2 other things. So we'll try and make sure that you are given updated versions of this, but this should do for the first year anyway.
Just put not limited to at the bottom.
Sorry?
Just put not limited to all the declarations.
Not limited.
Yeah, not limited to. so that it could all be added, kind of.
Oh, right, okay. I need to get some of this information from you later. I'd like to do that, by the way. Sorry, you wanted to ask a question?
Yes, just wondering, is there a relationship between the community guarantee that you just mentioned and the trust you were talking about? Is it always they're both disconnected, one an individual aspect and the other is a community aspect?
And I think the important bit is to link the two. So you can actually set up some community trusts. There is a group, the Bernician, I think, has tried to set up a universal community trust or something.
Oh, yeah.
There are all sorts of different things, but the important basis on it is that every member of your group should set up their own individual ones, and then we can work together knowing that all of us are on tax rebellion, if you like, or whatever it is, and then use those numbers to start to force our leaders to start to do what we want rather than forcing us to do what they want.
What did you call the cooperative again? It's multi-stakeholder?
Yeah, multi-stakeholder, limited liability, and then in brackets by guarantee. Platform, community, cooperative.
Thank you.
Multi-stakeholder, limited liability, platform, community, cooperative. Platform, by the way, that became possible in the 2014 Act because of the internet and Zoom and all the other things. Up until then, if you have an annual general meeting of a cooperative, the members had to gather in one room at one place at one time to hold the annual general meeting. And what they're saying now is you can do that over the electronic, so you can have people in Australia or wherever, providing they're all linked in on by Zoom or whatever on the meeting and have the ability to contribute, then that is an efficient, effective way of running an annual general meeting for a multi-stakeholder platform cooperative. In other words, we run it on the internet.
Thank you.
Yep. Are you familiar at all, have you considered at all stuff like Web 3.0, blockchain, Web 3.0 and blockchain and aspects like this at all? Are you familiar with any of those?
I am familiar with them, yes. I mean, I like the concept of DAOs. I don't know if you know about DAOs. You probably do. That's decentralized autonomous organizations. That's what we want our community co-ops to be. Decentralized, autonomous and totally autonomous organizations.
Yes.
And having a blockchain process to assist that is very important.
Yeah.
Now, there are one or two other things that are cropping up right now that we will need to get to grips with, but yes, you need all of this in order to become a really efficient, effective, multi-stakeholder co-op.
Chris, do you want to add?
Can you speak up a bit?
Did you want to add anything about the VAT?
About the
VAT?
VAT?
Within that group?
Oh, right. No, yeah, there are benefits. Thank you very much. There are benefits of having a co-op that people need to know about. One of them is that because you have a multi-stakeholder co-op, transactions between members of an association or a co-op are not vatable if they're a community organisation. And so if you, for instance, have a restaurant locally and that's a business member of a co-op, and you're all members of a co-op and you go out for a meal at the restaurant, then you can have the meal less the VAT. So that's one of the important things, is transactions between members of a multi-stakeholder co-op. Now that becomes important when, for instance, you want to buy a car. The VAT and tax on a car is an enormous amount of money, comparatively, and if the car dealer is a member, a business member, and you are a member, transactions between you and the car dealer are free of VAT, providing the purpose of the co-op is community-based. So we put the word community into the co-op, always for the community. You start operating as a multi-stakeholder co-op, you can start getting contracts agreed for all your members. Contracts with the mobile phone people, for instance. You could say, 100 of us, or 200 of us, or 5,000 of us are going to want to get one contract with one mobile phone provider, what benefit can you give to us? And put it out to all of them, and you'll probably get a 30% reduction on your charges for mobile phones. And same with cars or with other things. So as this was the original purpose of the co-ops in the first place, where they wanted to get together back in 1810 or wherever it was. Members started up in Lancashire to share the cost of food and everything else. And they found it was very beneficial. So if you're setting up a co-op, I would advise that you work with Cooperatives UK. There are 7,000 co-ops in the UK right now. And of those, quite a lot of them are willing to help you and to work with you on making it a success, using their experience. So there's 150 years of experience. And Cooperatives UK is the sort of coordinating body for all cooperatives. And you have to agree to a number of cooperative international principles. So the international cooperative principles are a very important thing that your members agree to when you join the co-op. You can't really call yourself a co-op publicly if you are not agreeing to the international cooperative principles. Although I do know one or two co-ops that are doing that, but that's this country for you. Any other questions?
Does that include the co-op?
Yeah, the co-op bank, for instance. I mean, anyway.
Do you think there's any risk of shooting yourself in the foot? Because by saying I've been aiding and abetting wars since 2001, I am now aiding and abetting. I've admitted that I've done that. So you've committed the criminal offence yourself. Or will that not be happen because everybody else would have to be...
Luckily, the legislators thought about that. And if you look at Article 25(3)(f) of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, it says that, the legislator realised that a lot of us have been conned for years, and deceived. If immediately you find out about this, you give up the criminal purpose, and you do what you can not to pay any more tax, then you will not be prosecuted. So it's very clearly laid out in 25(3)(f) of the Rome Statute.
It's your duty, Tony, not to pay tax and reclaim it back. Gets better.
Yeah, really, we all have a legal duty not to pay tax. That came about in the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal when Germany's leaders were prosecuted after the Second World War. They said we were just following orders. Hitler's orders, that's our defence. And the judges said, no, that's not good enough. You have a responsibility to the rest of the world, in effect. And if your government breaks international law, then you must disobey your government. So it's all written out in precedent and everywhere else. You have a legal precedent, a duty not to pay tax. And this is a lawful way of not paying tax that will not get you arrested or anything else. So really, this is why I say it's your passport to freedom. You never have to pay another penny in tax if you get this going. And if that doesn't work, then I have to pay for the tea.
I should have struck a better deal.
Another good argument is
Sorry?
Another good argument I would use is under the Acts and Statutes, all persons must pay tax, okay? You're not all persons, I'm not all persons, etc., etc. So you can break down, it's just word sorcery there.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So again, you could say, I clearly wanted to state that me, Phil Jones or Phil Smith has to pay income tax, and they will never do that either.
I think this is where we can put a lot of your points in letters going with this document. And you can make all the points you need to make.
A person is
I'll put some of them in here and some of them in the letter.
A person is a persona, you've been personified,
Yes.
not existing.
Well, it'd be very helpful to me if you could put some of this in, send it to me by email.
Yeah, I love sharing information with people.
Yeah, great. That would help, and I'll see what I can do to put as much of it as I can in the next version.
A lot of it you incriminate yourself as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, incriminate means that I'm committing a criminal offence, and I'm trying to do absolutely the opposite. I have, since 2003, rigidly said I will not commit a criminal offence.
How long did you go to prison for?
And it wasn't for a criminal offence, by the way.
Okay.
It was not a criminal offence, it's a civil offence. It's the only civil offence in this country. I was sent for 51 days in total. Well, I sent for 98 days and I served 51 in 3 sessions. But as I say, I didn't, up until then, I believed in the court system.
Not very civil, is it? Is it? Not very civil, kidnapping people and holding them hostage. So how that could be a civil matter?
It was a magistrate's court which is supposed to deal with crimes, you know, not civil stuff.
It's a game, isn't it?
Civil stuff, the whole thing is so corrupt, it's unbelievable. Yeah. But I'm now starting to realise the way around it is sign one of these. Other questions? It's just after 9:15. I've gone on rather too long. Perhaps what I can do is... Thank you very much. Do you want to talk to this?
About the cooperatives. Yeah, I mean, are people understanding the function of the cooperatives? Is it clear what the benefits to set up a cooperative is? Chris has talked about the VAT benefit, but by setting up a cooperative, it's a body, an organisation, which you can share benefits with. The taxpayers element is going to be set up as a cooperative as well, a national body, for everybody to be able to join the taxpayers cooperative. That's yet to be done. And it will eventually be offering different levels of service to people, because it's quite daunting, as you know, to do this alone. We all have to work together and progress this in small teams. So what we're encouraging at the moment is to get together, to work on this paperwork, start to form a cooperative. You can start to offer the services of this to your members as well, and to help recruit people into your cooperative. And eventually we'll be able to hopefully offer a national service at different levels, whereby for a fee we can start to assist people and get feedback from members, get that out to people, so we're on a very professional basis. And eventually, hopefully one day we'll have a website whereby you'll be able to put in your details, ask you various questions about your circumstances, and provide you with your trust documents pre-populated. And it will give you the latest version, for example, so we'll solve the distribution. But this is all very much in the future. Chris has only been out on the road in the last few months. So what we're encouraging for the time being is to establish community cooperatives. We're starting one in West London at the moment. We haven't actually established it yet, but we have a steering group towards establishing that, so hopefully within the next month we'll have that done. We're looking at another group in Milton Keynes who are hoping to do the same, or want to do the same. And we would encourage you guys to set up a local community cooperative, multi-stakeholder, as Chris explained, to pull together a services-free community where you can trade VAT-free, but also understand what a cooperative is and how it functions, and then when the taxpayers cooperative is available, those services, they can join that cooperative, and those services will be available for you to your members as well. So that'll help out a little bit in terms of clarification.
That's great.
Brilliant.
And we can find more sort of information on how do we connect up with that?
Well, we haven't actually got your website yet, it's all very new. We haven't even chosen domain names yet, you know, that's how it is. We're also looking to do everything extremely secure on the IT side. My background's IT, I've been in the industry a long time. And, you know, so we're looking to establish communication. You know, we need to move away. I probably a lot of you realise that Telegram isn't secure. I've got personal experience through reports that they've only obtained information on me via phone calls, text messages, email, and the likes of Telegram. So we have to recognise that if we're to operate much more in private, we have to actually have secure communication. So I'm trying an app called BRIAR. Some of you may have heard of it before, BRIAR. It's only available on Android. I'm trying that at the moment, and so we can set these communities up without anybody else knowing what we're talking about and who we're talking to. It's one thing having a communication, but what they can identify people. So we want to now stay a long way ahead of the game so that we don't give away. You know, this is a cooperative is a private entity. Let's keep it private, not disclose everything we're doing in emails to the authorities. Because if they need to attack us in the future, they'll have the information.
But you look at Signal.
Signal's not, Signal messages may be encrypted. The issue there is that everybody uploads their contacts to Signal. So when they look at who is in communication with whom, how often, they look at the metadata. So they know who's contacting each other, when they're contacting, how frequently, the size of the message. They don't know the message contents, but they know the size of the message. That's enough to establish the type of relationship. In fact, it's their preferred way of working out the type of relationship people are having, whether it's a personal relationship, a business relationship, etc. So when they need to find people, they find one person who exposes, you know, accidentally leaks the information through a Telegram post, they go back to the Signal data and link everything else back in. So Signal actually has a lot of problems. We have to remove our identity from the communication. So with Signal, we provide our telephone number. The telephone number is linked to a bank account. They know who we are. So with something like BRIAR, you can set yourself up. You don't have to give any identity. You can call yourself, you know, White Fluffy Rabbit. There's no central server. It's peer-to-peer. It's fully encrypted, so it's totally secure, and it's without any identity. So as long as we know our own identities, we can do that. So I'm just trying at the moment with a view to replacing it for Signal groups. And when we come forward with this technology, we're going to do it on a very solid technology platform base, because that's going to offer us the best opportunity.
What's your concerns with privacy then?
With privacy,
I would like to say you're not doing anything wrong.
No, but it gives them
ammunition to shut you down.
But it's not so much what we do now. It's where does that information? It stays out there forever, and it's when a regime comes in which actually wants to utilise that information. We have no in the future whose hands it may fall into. So I've been personally targeted, say, by the system, by the courts, by the police. I've done nothing wrong. But they will use information against you. I mean, I'll disclose basically, I've been classified by the family courts as an extremist and mentally ill. I had my 14-year-old son taken away from me because he was awake. And he wanted to come and stay with me, not with his mum. And she was all for the vaccines. So the courts have bought into the vaccine agenda completely. And they, no proof, are mentally ill. And the extremism is basically a step there to say you're one step closer to us controlling you. We have to make it decision. So you never know when your circumstances may change, when somebody connected to you may change one step away from you too. But by association between a Signal group, they know who's in these groups. They know the name of the group. Yeah, when I'm in Telegram groups, you know, I had to have a word with a common law friend of mine, a very good common law friend. He's very well versed in common law. But he was using terminology in the name of the groups, which would have raised a red flag. And then he automatically made me a member of that group. So we never know. We have to. These are the steps by which they're able to pick people off and keep people. So we need to now move forward in a much more secure manner. I mean, Chris has had experiences himself of being a man of interest, as you can imagine. His history goes back 20 years.
I don't think there's anything secure with digital. You'd have to go back to pen and paper.
Ultimately, but we can improve it 99%.
In what, sorry?
We can improve it 99%, our security improves. You know, our mobile phones, Google, Windows is total spyware. Google Phones, total spyware. We need to learn to abound in these things, and we want to, free open source software, which is what I'm proposing we're going to build these cooperative platforms on. So I'm going to be looking at the technology to build these, the technology for the cooperative platforms, which I would. You're free to choose whether it's your cooperative, you're free to choose whatever technology you want to do. But we're certainly the taxpayers cooperative going to be looking at the strongest possible, secure, private, free open source software as we can, which will be more resilient to cost in the event of restrictions to the internet, which we're proposing to come.
Okay, thanks very much, Jono. I know you're running out of time.
Yes, we just...
Really exceptional, and actually a deep heartfelt thanks for somebody who has stood up for their sovereignty, and all of ours in actual fact, and be prepared to stand your ground, hold it, pay terrible consequences, but you're still coming back fighting, not just for you but for all of us. This has been remarkable. So, a deep heartfelt thanks for what you've been doing. We really, really look forward to finding out what